And now, on This Week in History with Paul Waite.
Hello, everyone. For those of you joining us in non-radio land, how? It's Paul and Callum having a very entertaining time. Drew was saying how much how much the banter last week was very good on the show, and of course we had Callum making a very full contribution, like a rich piece of milk or bit of
creamy
cheese, bit of cheese,
Jersey milk, gold top.
Anyway, so welcome to On This Week in History, which, as always now, is being filmed as well as appearing live on Saturday. So here we are. So the first fact today, 1194. One of the worst kings of England, but is very famous. Even people who aren't very good at history know about him. Is Richard the Lionheart, or to give his name at the time, Richard de Coeur Lion. Well, Richard the Lionhearted.
Who may or may not have beaten Little John.
Richard Lionheart was born in France, and he died in France. Spent nearly all of his life not in England.
That's right.
And spent most of his time wasting poor old peasants like us money fighting in useless wars in the Crusades.
Yeah.
And ironically, so he fought in the Second Crusade, I think it was, Richard the Lionheart. And on his way back from the Crusade, he had to go through the Tyrol, I think it was. And he was captured by an unscrupulous baron who basically locked him up and asked the English for a big ransom. And it cost £100,000 to have him back. I would have just let him rot myself. So, it's quite a famous story. We read all about it. So Richard the Lionheart went on to be the king for about another 7 years, I think, after this moment. So then we got all the way to 1587, and Queen Elizabeth I, maybe the best monarch of all time, as we discussed, signed the death warrant of Mary, Queen of Scots, which is interesting. Obviously, we can't go back and ask good old Bess what she thought about that, but I think the clever money is on. It upset her tremendously to have to do this. Obviously, we're living in a period of great uncertainty.
Yep.
Literally, if you were English living through the 1500s, you were in fear, literally fear every day of a Spanish invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So the great powerhouse of the world was Spain. At that time, I'd say maybe they were 30% better than us. Significantly better, enough to be a problem,
Yeah.
And of course, it turned out that we needed the help of the Maker and nature to save us from them. But one thing I always say to people, God comes from Somerset in the end of the day. So, and the rest of you English people are very, very lucky that we happen to be inside your country.
That's right.
But I, on the other hand, I don't mind taking a bit of my Maker's stuff to Wales. And you Welsh people have done very well from it. So there we are. Yeah, lots of love. Borodar, by the way.
Borodar.
Or, as it looks, Bordar. Do you know that? That's what it looks. Bordar, but there we are. 1685, Duke of York becomes James II. And do you know what his regnal number was in Scotland, either of you boys?
7th?
Oh, God, that's so good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Off the top of the dome.
He was James VII of Scotland. Yeah, so it's very good. It's Callum smart, so he knows how he worked that out. So, because his dad was James VI. Funny. But I think most people would know James I of England, who was the 6th of Scotland, maybe. So I thought Callum would be able to do that. So the Duke of York was the brother of Charles II. Unlike his brother, although actually, just a fact, Charles II, although being the lovey-dovey of the Protestants, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that he took Catholic worship, particularly in the last few years of his life. James II, his brother, was an ardent Catholic. And so this caused a lot of trouble when he took the throne in 1685. And of course, later that year, we had the Sedgemoor Rebellion, where Charles II's illegitimate son, the Duke of Monmouth, who we talked about on This Week in History 2 weeks ago, who was the leading Whig politician at the time, came to Lyme Regis, and largely Somerset people got slaughtered in the vain attempt to make the Duke of Monmouth the king. But of course, very sadly, James II only lasted another 4 years anyway before he was dispossessed by William of Orange. So, just checking my numbers again. So, In 1716, Britain and Holland renewed an alliance. Very interesting, this. Not something people would generally know. Holland was an amazing powerhouse in the 1600s. They had the best navy in the world, Drew.
Oh, yeah.
On one very famous occasion, the leading admiral of the Dutch Navy, who was called Von Tromp, the Dutch Navy sailed up the Thames and ransacked London. And they were pretty much untouchable. Huge parts of what now is considered to be part of the British Empire, we nicked off the Dutch. So they got there first, you know.
Wow.
Australia was Dutch first. America, New Amsterdam. Yeah. New York was New Amsterdam.
Didn't you say South Africa as well?
But no, South Africa was slightly different. Yeah, we'll go on to why it's slightly different. And I need to do one more, because I don't know how I managed to talk too much, but and then the last one we're going to do on this part is in 1778, Britain declared war on France, which it pretty much did all the time anyway.
Yeah, sort of like a running theme over the last 1,000 years.
So that's great. I hope you enjoyed that first part, and I was wrong with my link. So next is the immortal Justin Hayward.
On This Week in History.
And welcome back to the second part of On This Week in History. And as I took so long to do the first one, I'll get a bit move on the second one. So in 1788, Massachusetts became the 6th state in the USA to ratify their constitution. So we're building up a nice little database in On This Week in History of all the different members. And here we go, nice one for Callum now, after the question last week. So in 1820, the USA population reached...
8 million.
200 million.
No, see, this goes to show, doesn't it, about your brain.
Last week, I thought I was really impressed by Drew's
last week
guess.
you were nearly on, and it's moved on 10 years, and you've just done a ridiculous... So, according to you, every bloody woman gave birth to about 50 children in 10 years.
20 million.
9.64 million, of which 1.77 million were Afro-Americans.
Right.
So, but quite a lot, nearly double. In 20 years or something.
So that is a lot, isn't it?
It is quite a lot.
Probably a lot more people came over from the Atlantic, I expect.
Just slightly out of order here. 1878, Greece declares war on Turkey. So I think, there's certain countries in the world where they just really don't like each other. So it'd be Greece and Turkey, Albania and Serbia. There's one. If you know that. Albania and Serbia. Serbians hate Albanians.
Wow.
Like serious shit stuff, and you tend to get a lot
Pakistan,
of people...
Bangladesh.
Maybe. A lot of people in Eastern Europe obviously don't like the Russians because of loss of liberty, etc.
Finland and
these
Lithuania.
sort of things. So then we have, where are we now? We have 1861. We have Texas succeeded from the Union, left.
Okay.
So that's interesting. We talked about that last week. So
Lone Star State.
1861, Texas left the Union, became on its own again for a bit. And in 1878, the second state ratified... what was that? I can't... was 1878? So this must be the South California. I'm just made a right mess of this. I've read my own writing and I can't actually make any sense of what it means. So
bit of trivia if people
I've actually
have
written down the second state ratified South California, and I'm thinking, what does that mean?
Don't know, mate. You tell me.
I think maybe it's to do with after the Civil War, the naughty boy states were allowed back in, so this must be California was allowed back in. Right. But I'm not convinced of that, people. So I shall definitely. I'm sorry for being so unprofessional on air. 1879, Joseph Swan demonstrated a light bulb using carbon glow. So that's quite exciting, isn't it?
Would have been at the time.
This is something we can talk about a bit. Callum would have been inflicted. This would have been inflicted on him many times. So in 1885, news of the fall of Khartoum reached London. So if I now do my famous impersonation, one of my impersonations, Callum, I forbade it. So who was I just doing, and what was he talking about?
1885. I actually can't remember.
Remember that film?
No, I can't.
The Fall of Khartoum. General Gordon.
No, it's not ringing a bell.
So, I forbade it. That was the Mad Mardi, played by Laurence Olivier. And General Gordon, who was one of the great heroes in British history, played by Charlton Heston, funnily enough, in the film. So they chopped off his head against the Mardis' Mardi was very, so basically after Khartoum fell, Gordon was killed. So in the battle, in the film, he very bravely, he walks down the steps with his trusty Muslim servant who obviously dies with him. And they obviously chop his head off and put it on a spike, and Mardi sees it and flips.
Sorry, where's Khartoum exactly?
In North Africa.
North Africa, right.
Yeah, Sudan.
Right, okay, in Sudan.
Yeah, so it was basically the British took too long to save him. So
right, okay.
2 days later, we came in, completely kicked their asses. Mardi, never seen again, apparently feared insane. So you've got to see. I've
heard you do that a lot in my life, but I didn't know where it was from.
Well, you just thought it was random because it's
probably.
the sort of thing that father would do, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
1894, the bottle opener was patented by William Painter. So there we are. It's interesting, isn't it? So before that, when you want to have a beer, you just smashed it against the rocks.
Yeah.
1901. What happened in 1901? Anyone have a guess? Who died in 1901? Really famous.
King George?
Queen.
Oh, Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria died.
Queen Victoria.
Queen Victoria, 1834 to 1901.
Of course.
67 years on the throne. Empress of India. Died in 1901.
Funeral at
and
Windsor
her
Castle.
funeral took... How do you know that? Oh, because you read it. You fucking cheating, whatever. You cheating so-and-so. Just the last one before we... in 1911, the first old people's care home was opened in Arizona. So that's a very interesting one, isn't it?
Bringing you the news of old. On This Week in History.
Shut up, man. Come on, whose show is this?
Yeah.
That bloke must go. So, ye old news of history, and welcome back to the final session today of On This Week in History.
Yay!
With Paul, Callum and Drew. So in 1918, women got the vote for the first time in Britain. How old do you think they had to be, Drew?
16?
18.
30.
13?
30?
Wow.
3-0.
Oh, 3 yeah,
Oh,
30.
30. I thought you said 13 then. I was like...
Well, there we are. What can we say about that? Tells us about Drew. 1935, Monopoly goes on sale for the first time.
Ooh, nice bit of Monopoly. Many family arguments have started from that game.
My favourite game was Totopoly.
For my birthday a couple of weeks ago, I got a Game of Thrones Monopoly.
Oh, nice.
I look forward to playing that.
Sounds very average.
But even better, I got a Lord of the Rings Risk.
Well, mate. In 1940, the Soviet Union began its new offensive against Finland. So we've talked about this before. The Finns, I think, if I had to fight with people who weren't... It'd be interesting to get Callum's view on this. If I had to fight with people who weren't British in a war...
Yep.
Other than Australians, Canadians and New Zealanders, who I consider to be the same.
Yes, me too.
The two nations I think I would choose would be Israelis and Finns.
I think that's a very good shout. I remember, funnily enough, I just read the other day, I had no idea that we were going to talk about this today. Soviet tanks outnumbered Finnish tanks 50-1, and I think Soviet soldiers outnumbered Finnish troops 200-1, just to give people an idea of how outnumbered they were.
So how did they do?
They basically were the best at fighting in the snow of any country in the world.
Wow.
So they basically...
Trained us.
They didn't ever go into full engagement. So it wasn't like a battle. So basically it was the whole time. Like
guerrilla warfare.
Say 100 brilliant
warfare.
trained Finnish people against, say, 10,000 Russians. They're going around killing two of them over there. And two of them over there.
What they did is they trained up amazing snipers, and they would have white camo, and they'd put them in trees, and they'd stay in trees for up to a week at a time just sniping off Russians.
Wow.
1942, the second Norwegian government of Vidkun Quisling forms. So the Quisling is an incredibly interesting character. I'm very interested in Norway. If you haven't seen it, I keep going on about this film, The King's Judgment, or whatever it's called, King's Decision, one of the best films you ever see. It's actually made in it's in Norwegian with English subtitles, and it's absolutely brilliant, and it just captures the heroism of the king. The Germans basically said, join us. The British are not on your side anyway. And the courage that the king and the government of Norway took in blowing up one of the biggest battleships of the Germans that sailed up Norway harbour, obviously knowing full well what would happen as a result, is... Norwegian people,
we love you.
You are the best. Thank you for the Christmas tree.
Thank you, Norway.
And of course, Quisling has gone down in history now as the name for traitors. The greatest traitor, arguably, in history. And next we have what do we have next? In 1952, Queen Elizabeth II became the Queen. So again, I was talking about my Winston Churchill scrapbook. So I actually had a scrapbook. I actually had pictures of her on her honeymoon in Kenya with Prince Philip and visiting various things at the time. So something which I've never really got over, and it sounds a bit daft, this. So 1958, I think the greatest football team of all time. And I think what's particularly sad about it is they already were the greatest team of all time, and two players in particular died. One, the immortal Duncan Edwards, who would have gone on to would have made Bobby Charlton look like a second-rater. You know, Bobby Charlton was 17 at the time. He survived, so he was a real babe. Duncan Edwards was 22, already played 30 times for England. And of course, people like him and Tommy Taylor got killed in the Munich air crash. And of course, poor old Man United had to build again. We played in the FA Cup final 3 weeks after that. Do you know?
Wow!
Wow! It was just
wouldn't happen today, I don't think.
No, it's just extraordinary. It's something. As a Man United fan, I've never really got over it. To be honest, it's sort of just you can tell I can't talk about it. To be honest, it's yeah, and it's terrible that Liverpool fans the chants they give about Munich in the matches is
really. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's rotten, that, isn't it?
Yeah, so you just stick to stealing cars, okay? 1991, F.W. de Klerk even says he will repeal all apartheid laws, and of course, fair play, he did. And of course, what happened then, boys? Well, you know this. He won the Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela, didn't he? I think in 1992 or 3.
About that.
Those of you who want to read a great book, one of the great books of all time, you read The Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. It's about 700 pages, but great read. I read it on holiday. It was just a great book. I nearly have as much respect for Mandela as I do Gandhi.
Really?
Yeah. The only problem I have with Mandela is he was a terrorist for a bit. And
sure.
I have to balance it out in my mind. But then you could say that all the Jews were against that. If you said that, then you wouldn't talk to any Israelis in 1948 because they killed British people.
True. Yeah.
So anyway, the final one we're going to do today, maybe my favourite author of all time, John Grisham. In 1991, he published his second book, The Firm. The Firm is a particularly famous book of Grisham's because, of course, it became a very, very successful film
with
starring Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Something about the way Grisham writes, not just in his corporate books. So you read things about about the young boys and the cotton plantations. But for someone who loves business like I do with a passion, and the way he writes about business is, I've never discovered an author where I feel like my soul is connecting to the page. It's just beautiful writing. Anyway, so talked far too much today.
Aspen Weight Radio Podcasts. Download at aspenweightradio.com or subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Podcasts.